Picture this. A man weighing 204 kilograms. That is 450 pounds of trained muscle, hardened bone, and 31 years of championship-level sumo discipline, stands at the center of a polished dojo floor in Osaka, Japan. The year is 1967. The month is March. The hour is just past 2 in the afternoon, and the afternoon light falls through paper screen windows in narrow white columns across the matted surface. He is not moving. He does not need to move. Men of his size and reputation rarely need to. Across from him, and this is the part that makes the 37 witnesses go still, stands a man in a plain white shirt and dark slacks. No GI, no belt, no ceremonial preparation. 5 feet 7 inches tall, 138 pounds. A man who looks, to every person in that room, like he wandered in through the wrong door. The giant inhales. The sound fills the room. The smaller man looks up, not at the giant's face, not at his chest, at his center, at the exact point where his mass connects to the earth beneath him. And for 3 full seconds, nothing happens. Then everything changes. This is that story. The Namba district of Osaka, Japan. A second-floor dojo above a textile merchant shop on Senakai Midori. March 14th, 1967. Tuesday afternoon. The room smells of cedar oil and old sweat, and something mineral. The chalk that sumo wrestlers press into their palms before about 40 tatami mats line the floor in a rough rectangle. 3 hanging lanterns. 2 open windows. A single brass bell mounted near the eastern wall, used to signal the start of training sessions. It had not rung yet that afternoon. His name was Tanaka Hiroshi, not the name history chose to remember, but the name his mother gave him in a small house in Niigata Prefecture in 1936. By 1967, he was known across the sumo circuit by a single honorific, Daiyama, the Great Mountain. His record, 62 bouts in sanctioned sumo competition, 62 victories, 0 losses. He had not lost a sanctioned contest in 11 years. He held the rank of Ozeki, the second highest rank in sumo's ancient hierarchy, and had been passed over for yokozuna only once, for reasons that had more to do with the politics of his stable than the quality of his wrestling. He stood 6 feet 3 inches. He weighed, on the morning of March 14th, exactly 204 kilograms. He had begun training in sumo at age 9. 22 years of twice-daily practice. 22 years of the shiko, the ritual leg stamps that build hip strength no other discipline replicates. 22 years of Tachi AI, the explosive forward charge at the initial moment of a bout. So refined that veteran judges said his first step could move a small car. His thighs, measured at their widest point, were 73 centimeters in circumference. His grip strength, tested by a sports scientist at Waseda University the previous autumn, registered at 94 kilograms per hand. He was not a cruel man. This is important to understand. Tanaka Hiroshi was meticulous, proud, deeply devoted to his art, and genuinely kind to the younger wrestlers in his stable. He brought rice from his personal kitchen to feed students who could not afford food. He wrote letters home to the families of his training partners when they were injured. He had a soft voice for a man his size. Observers often commented on this. And he laughed easily, a full sound that rattled the lanterns. But he had also never, in 31 years of living, encountered a physical challenge that he could not resolve simply by applying more of himself to it. Massachusetts force, pressure. These were the fundamental tools of his art, and against those tools, the laws of physics had always, reliably, sided with him, which is precisely why, when a mutual acquaintance named Watanabe Kenji mentioned, casually, at a dinner 3 weeks earlier, that there was an American-Chinese film actor and martial artist who claimed his system could neutralize any attack regardless of the attacker's size, Tanaka Hiroshi had set down his chopsticks, looked across the table, and smiled. Not unkindly, just with the certainty of a man who has never needed to question the laws of gravity. Bring him, he said. Watanabe Kenji had obliged. Word traveled through the martial arts networks of Japan and Hong Kong with surprising speed. A message reached Bruce Lee in Los Angeles. He was filming a television appearance at the time, and he read it, said nothing for a long moment, and then asked one question. But here's where it changes. When Bruce Lee arrived at Namba Dojo that Tuesday afternoon, He brought no entourage, no cameras, no reporters. He brought one person, Dan Inosanto, his student and closest training partner, who stood near the back wall that afternoon and watched everything with the practiced eyes of a man who understood what he was looking at. 37 people were present in that room. 8 were students of Tanaka's stable. 11 were senior martial artists from 3 different Osaka schools who had been invited specifically to witness. 6 were journalists, though none of them published anything that day, for reasons that will become clear. The remaining 12 were associates, friends, and hangers-on who had heard rumors and positioned themselves as close to the action as the room allowed. Not one of them expected what they were about to see. He entered from the north stairwell at 14 minutes past 2. White button-down shirt, dark slacks with a sharp crease, plain black shoes, not training shoes, street shoes. He carried nothing. He spoke to no one immediately upon entering. He stood inside the door for 11 seconds and did the thing that people who trained with him always noticed first. He looked at the room the way a musician listens to a room before deciding how to play in it. He was 26 years old, 138 pounds, 5 feet 7 inches. His arms, visible where he had rolled his sleeves to the elbow, showed a definition that did not look theatrical. It looked functional. The kind of muscle built by 10,000 repetitions of a specific movement rather than by weightlifting. His knuckles on both hands were scarred. Not the smooth calluses of a light practitioner, but the layered, rich texture of someone who had been striking hard surfaces since childhood. The outer edge of his right hand bore a pale line, an old split that had healed imperfectly. His eyes moved to Tanaka Hiroshi immediately. Not the way a challenger looks at an opponent. The way an engineer looks at a problem he has already begun solving. Dan Inosanto would say, years later, that Bruce's stillness in those first moments was itself a kind of communication. He wasn't performing calm, Inosanto said. He was genuinely calculating. You could almost see it happen. 3 of the journalists present later noted, in private correspondence, not published articles, that there was a moment during these first seconds when Tanaka's senior student, a wrestler named Fujimoto Ryu, who had been training under Tanaka for 8 years, took a step backward. Not deliberately, not as a statement, just backward, as if something in the quality of the room had shifted. Tanaka Hiroshi looked at the small man in the white shirt and felt, for the first time in a very long time, a sensation he could not immediately name. He filed it away and said nothing. He was too experienced to confuse sensation with information. But here's what nobody expected. Bruce Lee did not look at Tanaka's hands. He did not look at his shoulders or his legs or the massive width of his chest. He looked, for the full 11 seconds he stood inside the door, at Tanaka's feet. And what he saw there, the exact way a 204-kilogram man distributes his weight across the floor, had already told him everything he needed. Watanabe Kenji made the introductions in Japanese. Bruce Lee listened without expression. When Watanabe finished, there was a pause. Approximately 4 seconds of silence, in which the brass bell near the eastern wall could be heard vibrating faintly from the traffic on the street below. Then Tanaka Hiroshi spoke. His voice was, as always, unexpectedly soft for his size. But in that softness was something deliberate. The tone of a man who does not need to be loud to be understood. He said in Japanese that he had heard remarkable claims about this man's art. He said that he respected all martial disciplines, as a matter of principle. He said that he had, in his experience, found that the principles of physical combat reduced, ultimately, to a simple law, that force must be met with force, and that greater force would always prevail. He gestured, not unkindly, at the difference in their sizes. He asked, with what appeared to be genuine curiosity, whether Mr. Lee would like to demonstrate the theoretical basis of his method. The room inhaled. Watanabe translated. Though Bruce Lee had followed the Japanese closely enough that he began formulating his response before the translation finished. He stood with his weight balanced across both feet, arms relaxed at his sides. His internal state, recorded later, in his own notebooks, in the clipped and precise language he used for self-analysis, was something he described as Wu Wei, the condition of acting without resistance, of being fully prepared and fully empty simultaneously. He was not angry. He was not afraid. He was not particularly impressed. He was interested, An older man near the back wall, one of the senior martial arts observers, a judo instructor named Hashimoto, who had been practicing for 40 years, stepped forward and spoke briefly to Watanabe. He was suggesting, politely, that perhaps a demonstration was unnecessary. Perhaps conversation would suffice. Perhaps the differences between their methods could be explored academically, without physical contact between men of such different sizes. Bruce Lee looked at Hashimoto for exactly 3 seconds. Then he looked back at Tanaka Hiroshi. He spoke in English, slowly, and Watanabe translated phrase by phrase. He said he had no interest in proving anything. He said theoretical discussion was valuable, but it had limits. He said he would be glad to demonstrate, not a full contest, but a demonstration, if Tanaka-san was willing, on one condition. The condition that Tanaka would use his actual technique, not a controlled version, his genuine first move. The room went very quiet. Tanaka Hiroshi studied the small man's face for a long moment. Then he nodded once, a slow, deliberate movement that his students had learned to read as the final closing of a decision. Tanaka's senior student, Fujimoto Ryu, later described the next 30 seconds as the longest of his life. He positioned himself to the side, arms slightly forward, in the unconscious posture of a man preparing to intervene in an emergency. 8 other students arranged themselves similarly around the room's perimeter. 37 witnesses. 1 demonstration. The brass bell did not ring. They stood 6 feet apart on the tatami floor. Tanaka Hiroshi settled into his pre-bout stance, feet wider than shoulder width, knees bent, his massive torso lowered and forward, his arms extended in the classic sumo kami position. This is the Tachi AI preparation. In this stance, Tanaka's center of gravity dropped to approximately hip level, which in a man of his structure meant his mass was distributed with extraordinary efficiency across the mat. At full explosive charge, his body generated an estimated 1,800 kilograms of force per square meter at first contact. This is not metaphor. This is physics. Bruce Lee stood opposite him in something that looked, to the uninitiated observers in that room, like almost nothing. Weight balanced. Left foot fractionally forward. Arms relaxed. The Wing Chun ready position, the E-base stance, looks passive to anyone unfamiliar with its logic. It is not passive. It is a loaded spring. He looked at the 0.6 inches below Tanaka's navel, the dantian, the center from which all movement originates. Tanaka charged. In the first second, 204 kilograms of trained sumo mass launched forward in the Tachi AI, the initial explosive drive, covering approximately 1 meter of ground in a movement refined over 22 years of daily practice. Every muscle in Tanaka's body engaged in coordinated sequence, from his legs upward through his core. The sound his feet made on the tatami was a double crack, like 2 boards struck simultaneously. Every person in the room braced. In the same first second, Bruce Lee moved 16 inches to his left. Not a leap, not a dramatic sidestep. 16 inches. The movement originated from his hip, transmitted through his centerline, expressed through a pivot that required no additional preparation because his weight had been centered correctly from the moment he took his position. This is the first principle of Jeet Kune Do, economy of motion, the minimum movement necessary, no more. Tanaka's charge passed through the space where Bruce had been. In the second, Bruce Lee's right hand extended, not a punch, a redirection, a pack saw in Wing Chun terminology, his open palm making contact with Tanaka's right forearm at precisely the moment the sumo champion's momentum peaked and his structure was most extended. The touch lasted less than half a second, but in that half second, Bruce did not oppose Tanaka's force. He accepted it. He borrowed it. He redirected its vector by 11 degrees, just enough to amplify the overextension already built into Tanaka's charge. That's not a block. That's a conversation with physics. The third second belonged entirely to Tanaka Hiroshi. He recognized, in the deep, wordless way that 22 years of training creates a physical intelligence separate from conscious thought, that his base was gone. His feet, which had always been his foundation, his anchor, the source of everything he was capable of on the mat, were no longer under him in the correct relationship to his mass. He was extended. He was exposed. He was, for the first time in 11 years of competition, genuinely open. He did not fall. This is important. What happened was not a fall. What happened was a controlled recovery. Tanaka's extraordinary physical intelligence, forcing his body to compensate, to redistribute, to find a new base. But the recovery required him to step back. Twice. His right foot landed. His left foot followed. He straightened. He was breathing harder than a man of his conditioning should have been breathing after 3 seconds of movement. The room went completely silent. Not the held-breath silence of anticipation. Something different. The silence of people who have just seen something they do not have a category for. For seconds of it. 5. The kind of silence that happens when the brain has received information it cannot yet process. Fujimoto Ryu, positioned 3 feet away, said afterward that he had watched his teacher complete the Tachi AI approximately 4,000 times in 8 years of training. He knew its geometry the way he knew his own handwriting, what he could not explain, and said he spent the next 3 years trying to explain, unsuccessfully, was how a man 66 kilograms lighter had made a 204 kilogram sumo master look, for 3 seconds, like someone walking on ice. Bruce Lee had already stepped back. This is the detail that the journalists present noticed, and could not fit into any story they knew how to write. He did not press the advantage. He did not demonstrate again. He did not look at the room to gauge their reaction. He stepped back to his original position, returned his arms to his sides, and waited. Not from mercy, not from showmanship, from precision. He had demonstrated the principle. Continuing past the principle would have been noise. Tanaka Hiroshi straightened to his full height. His breathing was controlled now, steady, the breath of a man who has spent a lifetime learning to regulate his body's responses. He looked at the small man in the white shirt across 6 feet of tatami. The arena held its breath once more. Then Tanaka raised his right hand, slowly, deliberately, and gestured with open palm toward the floor between them. The gesture that, in sumo tradition, is used between wrestlers of equal standing to signal acknowledgement. He had not used that gesture, in that direction, toward any person smaller than himself in 31 years. 37 witnesses. 3 seconds. One lesson that altered the course of everything that followed. They moved to a smaller room adjacent to the main dojo. A modest space. 6 tatami mats, a low table, a window overlooking the roofline of the textile shop below. Watanabe Kenji withdrew. Dan Inosanto remained near the doorway, but did not enter. The door was left open. 2 men. 1 low table. Tea that nobody poured. Tanaka Hiroshi sat on his knees in seiza, his massive frame folded with the practiced ease of a man who has sat this way 10,000 times. He said nothing for a full minute. This was not awkwardness. Tanaka was never awkward. This was the silence of a man working through something genuine. When he finally spoke, his voice was even quieter than usual. He said, in Japanese, that he had been struck many times in competition. He had been pushed, thrown, twisted, and pressed by men of genuine strength and genuine skill. What had happened on the mat 3 minutes ago was not any of those things. He asked Bruce Lee directly, without deflection, how it was done. Bruce Lee considered the question for a moment. He poured the tea, unhurriedly, the way his mother had taught him in Hong Kong, and set both cups on the table. He said, what Tanaka had experienced was not a technique. Techniques could be learned, drilled, repeated, countered. What he had experienced was a principle. The principle was this. Every force contains its own redirection, if you understand its geometry well enough to borrow from it rather than fight it. He said, the Sumo Tachi AI was one of the most powerful initial movements in any martial art he had studied. Genuinely, he said it the way a man who has spent his adult life studying the mechanics of human movement says something he means. With specific admiration, he said, but the Tachi AI, precisely because it is so powerful, commits. It commits mass. It commits direction. It commits momentum. For 2/3 of a second at its maximum velocity, the Tachi AI is almost impossible to stop. And also, in those same 2/3 of a second, almost impossible to redirect once it has been redirected. He held up his right hand, the same hand that had made contact with Tanaka's forearm on the mat. He said, I didn't stop you. I redirected 11 degrees of your direction. You did the rest yourself. Tanaka Hiroshi looked at the hand. He looked at the tea. He was quiet for another 20 seconds. Then he said something that became, among those few people who heard it repeated through the years, the single most remembered line from that afternoon in Namba Dojo. He said in Japanese. Bruce Lee looked at him directly. He said, not irrelevant, borrowed. The distinction landed in the room between them like something physical. Tanaka Hiroshi extended his right hand across the low table, not in the sumo gesture, but in the Western manner, palm vertical, a handshake. Bruce Lee took it. They held the grip for 3 seconds. When they released, Tanaka said one more thing. He asked whether Bruce Lee would be willing someday to teach him. Not sumo technique, not martial arts cross-training. He said, teach me how you see. Bruce Lee stood, straightening his sleeves. He picked up his untouched tea and finally drank from it. He said, in English, and Watanabe, who had returned quietly to the doorway, did not translate this because no translation was needed. Years later, specifically, in the autumn of 1974, 14 months after Bruce Lee's death, Tanaka Hiroshi retired from active sumo competition with a final record of 89 bouts, 89 victories. He was 38 years old. He was, by any measure of the discipline he had devoted his life to, one of the most accomplished practitioners of his era. He opened a small dojo in Niigata Prefecture, not far from where he had grown up. He taught sumo to young students, as his own teacher had taught him. But there were people who trained under him in those later years who noticed something unusual about his methods, something that wasn't traditional, something that the other sumo teachers in the region didn't include in their curricula. He taught his students, alongside the shiko and the tachi-ai and the 1,000 other technical components of sumo, something he called mitsumaru, a Japanese term that translates loosely as to see through. He taught them to look not at an opponent's hands or his shoulders, but at his center, to read the geometry of another body's mass, to understand, before any contact was made, where the weight lived and where it wanted to go. His students asked him once where this idea came from. It was not in any sumo manual they had encountered. It was not part of the curriculum their teacher's teacher had taught. Tanaka Hiroshi was quiet for a moment. He was 61 years old by then, still enormous, still possessed of the stillness that had marked him even at his competitive peak. He said, there was a man I met once in Osaka, a long time ago, a small man. He was wearing a white shirt. His students, who had never heard this story, leaned forward. He said, in 3 seconds, he showed me something I had spent 31 years not understanding. He said, I have spent the time since trying to pass what he showed me to people who never met him. He paused. He said, that is how a lesson becomes larger than the moment it was born in. Those students went on to teach their own students. The Mitsumaru principle spread quietly through at least 3 subsequent generations of practitioners in the Niigata region, none of them knowing, until a researcher began tracing its origin in 2009, that the thread led back to a Tuesday afternoon in 1967, a second-floor dojo above a textile shop, and 16 inches of movement. Now we return to the frozen moment, the 450-pound champion, standing at the center of the dojo floor, the man in the white shirt across from him, the 37 witnesses waiting for the laws of physics to confirm what they already believed. The question they were all asking, in that moment before the charge, how does a man who weighs 66 kilograms stop a man who weighs 204? The answer, the one that echoed through 30 years of teaching and 3 generations of students, was that he didn't stop him at all. He redirected him. He borrowed him. He let the mountain move itself. One principle, one afternoon, one lesson that outlasted everyone in that room. And here's the question that stays with us. Of all the encounters in Bruce Lee's life, and there were many, in dojo floors and film sets and quiet rooms across 3 continents, there was one that he wrote about in his private journals but never discussed publicly. Not in any interview, not in any recorded conversation, not with Dan Inosanto, not with his closest students, not with Linda. A meeting in a city that was not Los Angeles and not Hong Kong and not Osaka. A person whose name he encrypted in the margin of a notebook that has never been fully decoded. And the only note beneath that name, in Bruce Lee's own hand, in 1971, 2 years before his death, a single sentence. That story, that is for another time.